Welcome to the Phenomenal Podcast, an authentic forum where real conversations happen. I'm your host, Phen, and each episode features an unscripted chat with everyday people. Get ready for a genuine, raw discussion. Enjoy the conversation. Hey friends, what's going on? It's episode 21 of the Phenomenal Podcast. I have Shem Wiseman here with me today. Super cool guy, old friend. We've known each other for probably like 15 years or so. Shem, why don't you go ahead and give a little background about who you are?
Sounds good. What's up, everybody? Appreciate it, man, for having me on. I was actually thinking about that too. It's like at least 10 or 12 years. 15 is probably an accurate guess. We've known each other at least since you were like 14, I think.
Yeah.
But as you said, I'm Shem Wiseman. I am 27 years old. I work 911 emergency here in DeKalb County in Atlanta. Stephen and I have known each other, like we just said, for a good long while, and I like to do a lot of stuff outdoors. That's pretty much it. I work and play outside a lot, and that's basically what I do.
You work outside, like being in the ambulance?
Yeah, we're driving all over the county all the time, so we're in people's houses, in the woods, do a bunch of random stuff wherever people are at when they call 911.
That's true. I can imagine you've been to some pretty interesting places and seen some interesting things.
Yeah, it's a little, it gets a little much sometimes, but it's fun. It's new every single day, so I like it.
Yeah, that's fair. That's totally fair. How long have you been? Are you an EMT or?
Yeah, I'm an advanced EMT. So there's like in the state of Georgia, there's like 3 levels basically that you can be. It's an EMT basic, an advanced, and then a paramedic. So I'm right smack dab in the middle, hoping to do a paramedic course here actually in October,
Nice.
and then go on from there to see who all the hell else knows where to go from there. More school probably.
Yeah. Gosh, school is such a racket. They just charge you an arm and a leg to be able to do anything in this world. All right, so let's dive in. So just for everyone to know, like, this is attempt 2. I have a lot of technical issues. This is the 21st episode, and this has happened more than once where audio has been like way off in a video, or like I'm talking and answering someone's question before they even ask the question, or it just like disappears. So this is take 2 for me and Shim. I do want to talk about some of the stuff we talked about last time because it's really cool. What you did, but we can also dive in. We have a little more time today, so we can dive into other things as well. But let's just start with the fact that you are a very accomplished thru hiker. Why don't you go ahead and give us a little background of what that means and what you've done?
For sure. So basically, thru hiking is, I guess, like the textbook or like the clinical answer for the thru hiking is hiking from end to end of a trail in 1 calendar year. So it could be, it could be a 12-mile trail, and you do all of it in a year, and you've thru hiked. As a continuous footpath, I think, is the one keynote thing people would say.
Yep, I remember that.
It's a continuous footpath. So thru hiking traditionally in the United States is like there's like 3 main trails that kind of come to people's mind. One of which is the Appalachian Trail. Goes from Georgia to Maine on the East Coast here. Actually, one of our mutual friends who's on your podcast actually as well already, Justin Smith, he got to do that. He was one of the first people that I actually ever knew personally who did it. So I guess he was definitely a inspiration piece there. We knew him both pretty well, so that was a really, really cool thing to look up to as a kid.
Yeah.
And then the other 2 that are kind of more popular, there's a million trails, but the other 2 that are kind of more popular are the Pacific Crest Trail. That's on the West Coast, goes from the Mexican border to the Canadian border, California, Oregon, Washington. And then the Continental Divide, the CDT, that also goes Mexico to Canada, and it runs through New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, and then to the Canadian border. So pretty substantial trails, pretty large-scale trails across some really, really, really wild and kind of historically prominent spots in America, which is actually pretty cool.
That is really cool because you've gotten to see such a vast like difference in landscape, across the country. And I think so many people, even people that live in the US, don't realize how big and how different like the US is across the entire country.
Right.
And
Well, and
yeah.
it's kind of hard to judge, even being from here. It's really hard to gauge, I think, a lot of times for folks, just scale and size. This I could be a little off on here. This is like a quick Google type info, so really take it with a grain of salt, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But it's funny we're talking about this now because I was just talking about this the other day. The overall, more or less, the overall land mass of the state of Georgia, just that state, is about the same as the United Kingdom. So,
Right. Yeah.
and that's a smaller scale state for the United States. So you look at the U.S. as a whole, and it's a huge, heap and hunk of land, we got over here. So going from one end of it to the other really is, um, it's a long way. I mean, like the CDT
Right.
alone is at like 3,100 miles. That's 3,100 miles. So, and that's just from border to border in a fairly straight line. So you look at the whole country; it's big. So yeah, I've been lucky enough to see a lot of different cool stuff that I'd pretty much never seen before. I've done a little traveling before this sort of thing, mainly through the church. You and I grew up in the same church.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of lucky enough. You and I actually went to Costa Rica together.
I was just thinking about that.
Yeah, that was a long time ago, bro. So
Yeah.
even just like that, a few things here and there, but it's a whole lot different, I think, than a 10-day trip or a 2-week trip or something like that. Than when you're out for like 6 months, just wandering around by yourself. Pretty much total freedom, getting to choose whatever you want to do.
Yeah, dude, that's so cool. It is. It's like was it a freeing experience doing that?
Yes and no. It's
Okay.
it's really hard to. It's like it's like a catch-22. The quick answer is yes. Definitely yes. And it's one of those things where like you can prepare all you want, but really you have probably no idea what you're doing. I had literally no freaking clue what I was doing. Um,
Right. The first
yeah,
time or all the times?
well, pretty much all of them, but the first time specifically, right? So, like, I guess backstory for everybody. So we're talking about through hiking. We're talking about these three main trails. I was lucky enough and blessed enough to do all three, which is kind of like what we in the
Mm-hmm.
Threadker community call triple crowning. It's kind of like a play on words from like horse races, like old, like equestrian races, the Triple Crown. So it's like the three main trails. And so I did the AT. It was the first one I ever did in 2016, pretty much straight out of high school. I had done one semester at college. And I was sitting down there. I know you and I have talked about this before, but I was sitting down there and I was like, what the heck am I doing here? Yeah, I'm in school and like, yeah, I made it here. Like, that's cool. That's I guess a big deal. Not everybody's blessed to go to college. And even still, I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't really want to be here. Like, this kind of sucks, to be honest. Like, I don't know anybody. I don't have any hobbies here. There's nothing. Like, I'm not really excited to be here. And I remember I was sitting doing my chemistry homework. And I was just, like, sitting in my dorm. And I was like, this freaking sucks. Like, I'm kind of done with this already. It's been one semester. And I just kind of
Well,
I just kind of pulled up YouTube. I remember talking to Justin as a kid or like younger in middle school and being like, "Oh, I know about the trail." I grew up backpacking a little bit with my dad
right.
and being outside all the time. And I was like, I could do that. That's not that hard. Come on, I could do that. And I just kind of like decided to do it on a total whim in like a 10-minute decision making time frame, and just like, yeah, I guess we're doing it.
That's so cool that you just jumped in, like so many people, and I'm sure you did like, think about it a little bit, but like so many people waffle for so long and then never actually end up doing what they want to do. So
Yeah.
it's cool that you thought about it and you just like did it,
Yeah, that was probably the first time in my life I've ever done something like that, to be honest with you. And that was like it's a big lesson. And to be fair, I mean, I really appreciate you point that out because like I didn't even pick up on that for like until years later. Because so many people would say that same thing. They'd be like, "Oh, that's so crazy! You just did it." And I was like, "I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
guess." I hadn't really thought of it that way. But yeah, so you know, did the AT in 2016. set out to do that, and kind of back when I was saying, I was like, I had literally no clue what I was doing. Like I had Googled a
Right.
couple things, I'd watched a couple videos, and like I had a bunch of old, this is so funny, a bunch of old equipment, like random, like decent-ish backpacking equipment from when I was in the Boy Scouts, like basically 5 or 6
Mm-hmm.
years prior. And I was like, oh, cool, yeah, I know what I'm doing. I've got all this stuff. Like, this is perfect. Like, what could possibly go wrong? And
Right.
now, like those worlds are so different, right? Like,
Yeah.
leisure backpacking and like like exploring and backpacking, things like that, versus like actually sitting down and prepping to do like almost like 2,200 miles to anywhere between 2,000 3,000 miles at a time. It's a really big difference between those worlds, and I had not a clue. So I'm just sitting out there. My dad drove me up there, he dropped me off, and basically we took a photo, and he hiked about the first 3 miles with me and was like, all right, love you, bye. And then that was, he turned around and he went back to the car.
That's funny. He only did 3 miles. That's because how many did you do that first day? Do you remember?
I did 8. I remember I did 8 miles, and I was so
Okay.
sore. And in my mind, it's so funny to think about too, because like so many people throughout the years, you talk to folks and they're like, wow, it's amazing. What an accomplishment. Like I could never do that. And I tell them every single time, I tell them, like, look, I had no idea what I was doing. And I did 8 miles almost every day the first week. Like most people walk more than 8 miles, whether you're in college or high school or whatever, on the way to class at school.
Yeah. Right.
Or if you're like any sort of like in your professional world, whatever you do for career wise, most people, unless you're sitting at the computer most of the day, most people that are like up and walking around, you'll walk like at least 6 or 7 miles in a day. And so I'm sitting there in hindsight, and like I went literally nowhere. Like,
Yeah, but you were on different terrain. Like you were actually hiking, not just walking. Or,
yeah,
you
that's
know.
true. And well, that's really true, because a lot of it is like it's nerve wracking. You don't know what you're doing, and you're out there, and the reality of it sets in, and it was March 1st. I remember I picked the 1st of March, and I got out there, and within the first 2 days there was just these massive blizzards coming in, like whiteout conditions, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, what the hell what did I do? Like, what did I
Right.
decide to do? This is horrible. Um, I mean, really, and in reality, like, it's not this grand romantic adventure that you think it might be.
Right.
I think later you learn these lessons, and have these memories that turn it into uh, a romantic adventure in your memory. But I think in the moment, right, it's just hard ass work, really. And so
Right.
you're grinding it out just like anything else, right? Like if you're doing 2 days at football camp, or if you've got like a proposal that you have to do by the end of this quarter, and you got like 3 hours to do it, it's like, it's a grind, really. So
Yeah. Oh man. Like okay, so like once you got into the throes of the first one on the AT, like
yeah.
how many days did you, or how many miles a day did you average?
So that's a really good and pretty common question. I'm glad you asked that. So
Mm-hmm.
basically, it's kind of hard to, I guess the total average, like it's the year that I did it, the
Mm-hmm.
mileage was, I believe, 2,189.9. Now, I only am so specific, and it sounds funny, but I'm only so, every couple of years it changes, right? Like wildfires knock out sections of
Oh,
trail.
sure.
They have to reroute it because of XYZ, right? So every now and then it's a bit longer, a bit shorter. And I divided it up based on my days on trail, and just a rough average was like 16 miles every
Okay.
day. So that's not including like days that I took off to get groceries or to do laundry, or if I was sick, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess a more realistic answer for you is like I ramped it up. So I started 8, then 10,
Right.
maybe 11, and then there was a period where I was like, okay, I feel strong. Like, let's see what we can do. Let's push. And I remember I did like 16 and a half, and I was like, I thought I was Superman. I was like, this is sick. Like, this is
Yeah.
awesome. And then from there, you make small changes. I remember my knees were literally, no exaggeration, they're about the size of grapefruits, all swole up, and I couldn't
Oh,
barely walk,
jeez.
all tore up. So you start throwing gear away, and you send stuff home, and you start making adjustments. And luckily, the AT is really popular, so I had like a lot of other folks on trail that were way more prepared than me, and kind of mentored me a little bit and gave me the tough love I think, that I really needed, where they're like, hey, this is a bunch of garbage. Like, you don't need this. Realistically,
Right.
have you used this yet? It's been 2 weeks. Like, have you used this at all in the last 3 days? No. Okay, throw it away, And I think that's a big lesson for life too, where it's like, I know, again, you and I have talked about this specifically, but it's like people pack their fears emotionally or actually physically, right? So in my case, it was physical packing. And my biggest fear at the time was subconsciously, I was just so afraid of being cold and like getting hypothermic. I had
Right.
four, right? And it's like, in reality, like 4 jackets doesn't seem like a lot, at home,
Right.
whatever. But in your backpack, you got all your other gear, your tent, sleeping bag, clothes, food, stove. That's a lot, excess can kind of be your downfall. So that was kind of a hard lesson for me that I started to learn over the course of that trail, and then again over the course of the next like 7-year journey to do all 3 of these. People will pack their fears, and I think that's like so true in all other facets of life as well. Like if you're afraid of missing out, or if you're afraid of like not having friends or not being invited to things, or then you're constantly overloading your schedule with things to do and seeing people, and you don't you start to not take as close care of maybe your loved ones or yourself. You don't really give yourself like rest or alone time or time. This is true for me, not as much time like in the Word. Like you and I are both
Yeah.
believers, and that's a big thing. It's like I overload my schedule all the time. Next thing you know, I'm like, oh, well, I haven't gotten in the Word in like 2 weeks. Whoops, what's that all about?
Right. Right. It's so easy to do. And I mean, that's something that you told me the last time we talked, the whole thing about you pack your fears. It's actually something I think about often now. It's just
Mm,
like, and it was so deep and meaningful the first time I heard it. And so like now it's something that I try to think about. It's like, hey, like, what am I doing in my day-to-day life? Like you just mentioned, like, and that was a good example, but like, what else
mm,
am I doing that is keeping me from moving forward? Like, what am I scared of? What's something that I'm doing that's, you
right.
know, keeping me from obtaining my goals, my dreams? So
Yeah, and I think a lot of that too just stems. It's like so subconscious. It's hard, obviously, right? It's like hard to
right.
identify a lot of times. So for me, it was like a really cool and unique way, I guess, to be slapped in the face with it, so to speak, right? Is like sitting there and realizing, I'm barely like 10 days into this trip, right? My knees are all swollen. I'm like, I can't freaking do this. Like, what is wrong with me?
Right.
Like, weak? Am I like, what's going on? And you get to there's this one really iconic spot. It's 3 days in, give or take 3 days, like 30 miles into the trail, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think you've been there. I think we all went there together once with Justin. I think it's Neil Gap. There's like a little store there at Blood Mountain, and they have this really cool service that they do. I think it's free for through hikers. Well, they'll do they call it like a pack shakedown, and they'll basically be like, hey, like we're all semi-professionals, I guess, self-declared. Like
Right.
why don't we do your stuff for you and help you out and see what you can, or you can trim off some weight, so to speak.
Mm.
And so they have a like a fish scale in there, basically, like that you can hang your backpack on.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
And my pack was like 40 pounds. And I'm sitting there as like a 19-year-old kid, right? Skin and bones, basically. I've always been kind of small my whole life. And I'm
Yeah.
carrying 40 pounds on like a 10-year-old backpack that I got out of my garage.
Right.
I didn't buy any new gear. I just threw stuff in a 10-year-old, 12-year-old backpack. And so they're all kind of sitting there like, hey, man, like we believe in you. You can do it. And you can do it however you want. Like the old adage on trails, hike your own hike.
Right.
However, you know, if you're willing to listen, we could probably save you a lot of pain and suffering if you want. And so that was kind of one of those. That was like that big moment. I was like, "What am I doing? What is all this crap?" Like I'm carrying a pair of sunglasses, right? And it doesn't. It seems really innocuous, but it's like the Appalachian Trail is called the Green Tunnel for a reason. Like you're in the woods most of the time. Like, do I
Yeah.
need glasses? I'm carrying 4 jackets, right? Like, can I wear them all at once? No. Okay, then let's get rid of some.
Right. You don't
That's
you don't need a sense of style on trail.
right. It's like, well, not even. Not well. Depends on who you ask. There's a lot of
I guess that's
weird
fair.
styles that come out now, but it's all just in fun. You're 100% right. It's
Right.
like does it have function? No. Okay, get rid of it. And I think that's a big thing that I try to use now is like, it's so easy to just like become eclectic and just like pick up a bunch of crap. And then, you never think about it. And then you move, right? Like you and Josie have been together for a couple of years now. I'm sure when you moved in together after your wedding, it was like, I'm sure there was a lot of that. We're like, where did all this stuff come from? Like, do I need this? Do I need to keep this?
Oh, dude, it still happens every day.
Yeah, same. Every day I
It's
look at the room and I'm like, can I throw that away yet?
Yeah, right. The worst is like, I guess I don't know if this applied to you being on trail, but like you look at things like old T-shirts, and you're like, man, I haven't worn this T-shirt in years. But the thought of like donating it or throwing it away, it's like, well, like what if I want to wear it again? Like
Right.
later down the road. Like I really like this shirt. Do I ever wear it? No, but I still like it.
Right.
So
Like weird things that hold value, like sentimentally, but zero function.
right.
And I think there's room for that, right? There's room for that, and I don't know. I think it's just a really good lesson in like balance. It's like, okay, where am I actually going to use this ever again? Just like you said, and maybe not. Can I donate it? Can I give it to somebody? Is there somebody that I know personally that like has always wanted to start backpacking, but they don't know what they're doing? Like, could I give them some of my old gear that they might want?
Right.
Like stuff like that. And I think that's something I try and think about a lot. That kind of pertains to the same, like you pack your fears, right? Like, are you afraid of abandonment? Like, are you constantly around other people, or are you willing to be by yourself for a while? Are you willing to be uncomfortable and like no music, no phone, no nothing,
Yeah.
and literally sit in silence in your own brain, right?
Right.
Like, I kind of hate that sometimes. I'm gonna be honest, but
Yeah.
I think that pertains. It's like you pack proverbially, or physically, you pack the things that you're most afraid of.
Definitely. Because I actually do. I try to sit in silence, but like at the same time, it's so much easier to just put on some music or to not even listening to something. But like if I'm walking my dog, sometimes I leave my phone at home, and I should do it more often.
Yeah.
But other time when I don't, all of a sudden I'm just like sitting there, and I find myself like scrolling through something while I'm walking my dog. I'm out in nature, and I was like,
Oh,
wait,
dude, same.
why am I doing that? Like this could be a peaceful moment for me to just unplug and enjoy the time and the sun and things like that. But
well, don't feel alone at all in that. Obviously, I mean, like
oh right,
we're sitting here talking about through hiking, dude. I mean, like between the 3 trails, the Triple Crown, it's like roughly 7,800 miles. That I've that I've slugged along the United States, and I cannot tell you how many times. If I'm being totally honest, probably at least like 70% of that is headphones in, listening to something.
right.
So, and it's just like, and that's literally the whole. I was out in some of the last most remote places in the United States, and I'm like, yep, throwing on a podcast. It's like, what am I doing?
It's so easy to tell yourself like, oh, I'm being productive. I'm listening to some type of podcast. I'm learning something or whatever. But there's so much to learn of just being alone, like literally just alone. I try to do it in the car.
Yeah.
More often than not. But just sit in silence.
It's hard.
It is hard.
I will say though, there were some fantastic moments where, I mean, we're talking about this, right? Specifically, there's some fantastic moments that like they demand your attention, right? Like while through, where it's like you don't have your headphones in, you're not around anybody else. I mean, I just finished up the CDT this last year, 2023.
Right.
So I think I got home like September of 23, and there was a long stretch of that trail. For anybody that doesn't know, the CDT is like the biggest, baddest brother of all the trails, so to speak. It's pretty new. The physical actual route is still pretty new. A lot of it's just like connected old Forest Service roads so that they could have an official start to finish for the time being while they like raise funds and like get permitting and things like that. So a lot of it is just pretty much out in the middle of nowhere, like totally remote.
Yeah.
Through Wyoming and Montana. And Colorado too, to be honest, like northern Colorado, super remote. So there'll be moments, right? Like I did a stretch of almost, I think it was like just under 500 miles totally alone. You know, like I think I saw 3 or 4 people besides when I went into town for groceries, right? So physically living day to day on trail, you know, go to sleep in your tent, wake up, pack up your tent, put your shoes on, walk, get to camp, put your tent up, take your shoes off, go to bed, you know, repeat. Saw like 4 people in like a 500-mile stretch. And that gets really lonely really fast.
Yeah.
Really lonely really fast, right? I mean, like
Right.
you yourself like coming up with movie plots for yourself and like coming up with your own book stories and like, you know, you pass, like I remember I passed like 3 or 4 moose one morning and I just sat there and was like talking to the moose. I was like, "Oh, what's up, guys? My bad. Like you guys go ahead. I don't mean to startle you guys, you know." And they're just
Right.
looking at me
Like, what the heck is this guy doing?
yeah, like why is this human over here? Go away. So yeah, and
That
I think a lot of those moments like demand your attention, you know, because you're sitting there,
right.
you're like, oh yeah, like when is the next time in my life I'm gonna be the only human in like 100-mile radius for the next 30 days?
Yeah. It's interesting because there's such a it's good to be alone. It's good to sit with your thoughts and things like that. But I think it's better for us. We were designed to be a part of a community, you know?
Yeah,
Like we were designed to be creatures that commune with one another. And so being alone for that long, it probably does something to you as a person, you know?
oh yeah. I mean, I think it's funny. I have like 27, and I still have these like phases depending on where I'm at, where like I'll feel on edge if I'm like totally alone for some reason, right? I'm
Right.
like, where this is weird. Something's up. And I think a little bit of that is instinctual, you know, like your body is putting you on response mode just in case something happens. But it was funny because during that period, that's how I felt the whole first half of that 500 miles. I was like, I just felt on edge all the time. You know, like you'd hear something. It was in Wyoming, so it's pretty open plains or high desert, you know,
Mm-hmm.
for the sections I'm in. So it's like there's trees and some forests, but they're like scattered. You know, you can see pretty far. So
Right.
I'll be in my tent at night and you'll hear like a cracking, creaking noise, and I'm looking up. Okay, something's like I'm the only person here.
Right.
So,
Right.
you know, so you
What's
get a
out
little
there?
yeah, exactly, and that's just a part of it. I mean, you're literally in like rural, you know, middle of nowhere nature. That's the whole point. That's one of the reasons I love it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that you're not still a little bit on edge, and you know, you learn your boundaries, so to speak, with nature. But it's funny because you say like it does something to you. Because I remember when I got finished with like that really long stretch, I kind of came, you know, I was hiking south at that point, so I got a little bit closer to a more populated part of the state and more like weekenders were out hiking, enjoying themselves, and then I
Mm.
kind of hit what we call a bubble, where there's like a lot of thru hikers will be in the same area, the same zone, for whatever reason, whether it be injuries or you know families coming to visit, so they slow down, whatever. So it
Right.
causes like vortex in town, and it creates like a little bubble of hikers. And I remember I came up on this group, and that night I was going to set up my tent, and my mind had 100% like 180 degrees changed from feeling a little on edge because like where is everybody
Right.
to feeling on edge like there's too many people here.
Right.
It was really weird because like this
Right.
dude in his tent up like I don't know 400 or 500 feet away from me, you know, like good privacy for a campsite.
Yeah.
And in the back of my mind, I'm sitting there and I'm like, dude, why are you so close to me? I'm like,
That's
go
funny.
away. So it changes you a little bit, and it
Yeah.
makes you feel a little bit like a hermit, you know?
Right. That's the word I was thinking of. But so I have a similar experience. It not being alone, but when Josie and I went to Japan in April,
Mm,
we were like so getting around Japan is fairly easy. There's English pretty much everywhere, like
mm,
you know, signs in the stations, the restaurants. At least they have pictures on menus and things like that.
sure.
But like, so it's easy to get around. It's easy to order. It's easy to be there. But no one speaks English. Like English is like if you want to talk to someone, if you want to converse with someone, it's really, really hard. And even the
Yeah.
people who do know English, they don't know it super well. And so like you'd ask them a question and they'd answer it in a way, and I'd be like, thinking about their response, and I'd think about the question and how I phrased it or something like that. And I'd be like, oh, I guess I understand why you answered that way, but that was not what I was asking you.
Right. I guess it forced you to be like way more deliberate with thinking what you want to say too, I bet.
Right. Yeah, definitely. But then, so we planned when we went to Osaka. Emily Ann lives there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so we spent with the evening with her. We got dinner. We walked around. She showed us all over. And that time with another American and English, like, primary English speaking person we cherished it. That was like halfway through our trip. And so like we'd been there for probably 6 or 7 days, and it just like being minorities and not being able to speak the language and things like that. And then running into someone that we knew and we could talk to, it was like a breath of fresh air. I didn't experience the anxiety that you did, but yeah.
Well, and to a degree, you probably did, because it's like you feel so isolated and alone, even though there's people all over. It's like you can't, no one, you can't express your ideas. You can't share who you are. And all of a sudden, people, it's like, what's going on here? I can't get any of this out. No one hears me.
Right. Luckily, I had Josie, and we were together the whole time. Yeah. But there was one time where she stayed in the hotel room, and I ran down to the store on the corner, and I was the only one out there. And that was like one of the weirdest experiences of my life, in all honesty. Because, we're both white guys who live in the U.S. We never experienced being a minority ever. But there, I looked around, and Josie was not with me, and I was the only one on the street that looked different, that was different. And that was a weird experience. I was like, whoa, like, is this how people who are not from the U.S. that living in the U.S., is this how people feel every single day?
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Super good perspective, I mean, it's like, well, and it just kind of reminds you too, it's like, hey, you can get into a rhythm doing something, but it's like, that doesn't mean that it's how everyone else.
Right.
Like, other people are other people. They have their own emotions and their own feelings and thoughts. Like, they're not just like random people wandering around next to you at the bus stop.
I mean, there are people who probably are just like NPCs just out there in life, just like.
Okay, actually, I take back what I said, because working 911, dude, there's definitely random like NPCs out there. There's some random people. Oh my gosh, dude. The stories, the crazy people.
People are crazy.
It's wild, dude. It's wild. I remember just recently, this only one I'll bring up because there's really no point, but just recently I was driving down pretty nice part of town, like I was over near the Emory Hospital system. I like it there. It's really nice. There was this dude, full business attire, briefcase, and like a lunchbox.
Okay.
Walking down the street, on the sidewalk, regular business.
Right.
Dude looks both ways like he's going to cross the street, and then takes a step, right, like into the street, and his foot just stays suspended in the air, like he's doing like a pistol squat, and he just freezes, and he just stood there, and that was it.
He just glitched out.
Yep, he just glitched out, and he did not move. He didn't go anywhere, and we were at the red light, and by the time the light turned green and I drove off, he was still sitting there just like that. And my first thought was like, wow, dude, drugs are so bad. Drugs are so bad. Yeah, it was wild.
There's people who actually believe that like things like that are like glitches in the system, and like that people don't exist. Like people don't actually exist.
Well, if that's the case, and this is a simulation, I've had the worst simulation ever.
No, come on, you can't say that. You can't say that.
No, definitely not. No, I've had a pretty good life.
You've experienced some pretty incredible things.
Yeah, 100%. Well, and that's, I think, a good, time. We're obviously joking here, but it's like a good time we're talking about before. It's like you're like, for me, my family and my faith are probably they are the two most important things.
Yeah. Right.
For me. Right.
Right.
And and I know I've told you this before, the AT, hiking the Appalachian Trail, was probably the only thing that could compete with those in any measure of important experience to me. Like
right.
like one of the most like quintessential moments or
Yeah.
makeup moments in my life that were that influential, right?
Well,
And so
right. Oh.
you have people talking about like, oh, we're all, it's all a simulation, blah blah blah. It's like, I don't know, man. Like that you can do whatever you want whenever you want, and
Mm-hmm.
there are consequences to that. But you can be whoever you want to be, right? And that's why
Yeah.
I think faith is so cool, because it's like you can do whatever you want with your faith. You just have to, there's consequences.
There are
There,
consequences.
you
Absolutely.
know, a part of life that is out of our understanding.
That's so true. And people always ask those crazy questions. It's like, what about this, and this, and the end times, and all these things? And I'm like, dude, like,
I don't know.
right, like, there's an aspect of this that it's called faith, and that's just what I have. Like,
Exactly.
At the end of the day, like, I believe what I believe because of the personal experiences that I've had. Those are my testimonies. That's my testimony. You can't take that away from me. But
Correct.
most of it, like, there's a lot of factual evidence and things like that, and we can dive into that I'll dive into that with people and things like that. But at the end of the day, there are questions that me, anyone, the most esteemed pastor will never be able to fully answer with 100% certainty because of faith.
Right.
We just have to have faith at the end of the day. But you talking about the AT being up there with like your family and your faith, I think that makes sense because that was such a life defining moment for you. Like it helps define who you are. Your family did that, your faith does that, and then that journey helped you become who you are now.
Right. Well, no, 100%. And it's so funny, how things change, and how, at least for me, I'll in really hard times, I'll like bargain with myself in my head. I'm like,
Right.
okay, like here's what we're gonna do. I'll, we can quit if XYZ, or
Yeah.
like, we're not gonna quit right now, but like XYZ. And so it's so funny because I have such a strong memory of this. I told myself one day, I was like, okay, I'm not quitting because I will literally never forgive myself. And quite frankly, I cannot, I don't think I can handle like having to explain myself to every single person that I know personally who asks like, "Oh, how'd your trip go?"
Right.
If the whole rest of my life, I'd be like, "Oh, well, you know." But I told myself, I was like, "Okay, I'm not quitting, but I'm never doing one of these again. Like, I'm not going to be a quitter, but I'm never subjecting myself to such horrid torture ever again."
Right.
And then, of course, right, like we're sitting here talking about the Triple Crown, roughly 8,000 miles of hiking later. And I'm like, whoops, I'm like 3 of these, and I would love, dude, I'm sitting here itching to do more. It's such a hard balance. I'm like every 18 months, if I'm in the same place for like more than 18 months, I'm like, oh, it's time to leave.
That's funny because I mean, you've lived in Georgia your whole life, right? Other than like the times you've been doing things.
Yeah, like, well, and exactly. It's like I've lived here my whole life. I've pretty much never really left the metro area, and it's like, I spent like 2 months in China, and I spent like 2 months in Colombia at one point. But that doesn't, you're not really there. There's an end date. You haven't moved,
right?
And so yeah, it is really funny how that it always feels that way. You always end up, maybe not always, but lately I've always ended up coming back here. But yeah, I don't know, man. It's like every cycle, I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go. I'm getting a little itchy over here, like I'm starting to tweak a little bit. I need to leave. So, but I don't know, man. There's so much more out there too that's so exciting to me. Like, I think it's a good perspective to have. You and I were just talking about this with jumping right in, right? Like the AT, the first one, I had no idea what I was doing. And now I would consider myself a fairly well-vetted, understanding through hiker, right? Like, almost 8,000 miles, like good amount of, that's all days combined of all 3 trails. It was like 396 days total on the trails. It's like over a year of hiking.
Yeah.
Like that's pretty decent experience. It's nothing compared to like a lot of the real pros out there, but I don't know. It's almost like now that has become an easy fallback for me too. It's like, oh well, I know that world now. Like if I want something new, I can just go do that. But how new really is it? Like I think I'm ready to kind of jump in and totally try something completely different. Um, like who knows what it is? I think I'm still looking. I think I'm still looking.
What are the things that you might be looking at?
Well, they're definitely like a different trajectory, right? Like I'm kind of at this point in my life right now, like I really want, which is funny, we're just talking about running away and leaving and adventuring, but at the same time, like I really do want something that feels like my own. Like I want chickens to be 100%. Dude, I want my own chickens, bro.
Yeah.
I want chickens. I want like a vegetable garden. I want like a greenhouse. I want to do like traditional, local, regional vegetable based gardening. I think that'd be sick, being able to kind of like try something totally new to me. I've never really done that before. I have no idea how to do agricultural based stuff.
Yeah.
And I think it takes like a cool new learning curve. Like it's a little hard and try something new to kind of take care of yourself a little bit and feel like you have a little bit more autonomy than just having to go to the grocery store all the time.
Yeah. Josie and I talk about that a lot every once in a while. And there's we always mention, it's like, oh, what if we just like sold our house and moved to like the middle of nowhere? But my biggest thing, and it always goes back to the community aspect, like moving away from people would be really hard for me. And I know that we could still see people and everything, but like it would be a lot more work. Right now I mean, planning things with people now is hard with our friends, like people that I want to see. Sure, I can walk outside and see my neighbors and stuff like that, but I don't want to do that. Seeing people that I want to see and coordinating all of our schedules is really hard to do. So I can't even imagine the wrench that would be thrown into it if we moved to like an hour and a half away.
Dude, exactly what you mean. You and I both have like fairly big families in today's standards, and it's the same way for me, dude. Like I've the last couple of weeks I've been looking at property like up near, just like outside Franklin, North Carolina area. Like near the National Forest and like near lots of good like outdoor space, and it's definitely more rural, but there's still towns, like smaller. And that's like the number one thing I keep coming back to as well. Is like I just got back involved with like our old guys group, like Bible study group that we all, that we dad at, and it's like trying to start. It's starting over, It's like being, luckily that spot's about the same drive to my family, but it's still like 2-3 hours, in some cases like 6 hours for my family.
And the other thing that I think, so Josie's dad sent us this email. There's a house for sale. It says it's in St. Simons. It's not St. Simons, Georgia. It's like 30 to 45 minutes outside of St. Simons. But like before I knew that, it's for sale for like $250,000, and I think you get 5 acres of land.
What?
Yeah, but it's like literally the middle of nowhere. Like we're not far from St. Simons. We could get there. We could get to Brunswick, and just a little bit. We just travel on the interstate for a little while.
Sure.
And like that sounds pretty cool. But then I think about it, it's like, okay, one, we're moving away from people, and we'd have to make a bigger effort to go somewhere where the people are. Two, like, are there even young people that are like people to commune with, people our age?
Correct.
And so like that's the other aspect I get to, is like it's not just community, like any type of community. It's like the specific types of community. Like right. You need people that are older than you that can mentor you, but you also need people that are your age that you can be like, hey, like I'm really struggling with this right now because this is the time of life that I'm in. And you're either in it with me, you just left it, or you're about to enter it. Like you know what I'm talking about.
Right. And You're 100% right, and it is really hard. It's so frustrating too because it's like, why can't this just be easier? Like,
Right.
why can't I just have them both?
Right.
I want to move. I want a garden and chickens, and I want community.
Yeah. What's so hard about that? Come on, gosh.
It's so frustrating, and I get it. There's times, like part of the reason why, genuinely part of the reason why I do want to move is because like the last 3 years I've been working in the metro area, like on an ambulance, sitting on 285 or 85 pretty much all day, and driving people back and forth from hospital to hospital, and it's like I love my job, but it's just after a while, it's just like there's just too many people here. I need to move. I need something a little bit more, almost like a little bit more intentional feeling than just like driving around a sea of people all day long.
Yeah. But then, like, how can you be intentional in the sea of people? Because that's still a good thing to tackle, and you can still find value and meaning in that life.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, it's definitely difficult. It's definitely hard. I'll tell you what, if anybody's listening and they feel the same way, let me introduce you to this thing called thru hiking. It is to capitalize on both those feelings. And I joke, but at the same time, dude, it is really cool. The thru hiking community, specifically on the Appalachian Trail, is it's so old and like well established at this point, which is sounds so funny, right? But it's just such an interesting microcosm of like humanity and community in action, because you get like people from all around the world. Like I met Australians and Germans and any country in Asia you could possibly imagine. Tasmania, South Africans, all these different kinds of folks that come to do this trail. It's been their lifelong dream to come hike this trail. And so you meet all these people from all across the world. And the one unifying thing is that everyone has the same goal, which is to get to Maine.
Right.
Right. The one unifying, concrete, tangible goal too, not like world peace or like,
sure.
Right.
Right.
There's a legitimate actionable goal here. And in order to do that, you have to walk. Like you got to get there.
Right.
So it's really cool because it pulls people together, from all different walks of life, all different religions or lifestyles or abilities. I've met so many folks on trail that were 100% blind. I met a dude that was thru hiking with his dog as a seeing eye dog.
That's crazy.
Like, that to me is insane. That is that's truly a feat of courage and like insanity, right?
Right.
And just the coolest, nicest, most humble people, right? And obviously you run into some D-bags everywhere you go in life, but that's part of life. And I'm sure they're not always that way, right? Maybe they're having a bad day. I don't know. But it's so cool because it's like this microcosm of humanity where everyone just kind of looks out for each other like a big brother, kind of mentality where it's like, hey, we're all kind of in this together. Do you need anything? Or having the wherewithal to like swallow your pride and be like, hey man, like I need this or I need that or like I need help. And people are right there to help you out. It's really cool. And it's a weird, interesting phenomena, right? Like I don't know my neighbors. I don't know my next door neighbors. I have no idea who they
are. I feel convicted about that because I don't either. We've lived here 3 years. I mean, I've interacted with them, but like I would never knock on their door to be like, hey, like, how are you doing? Or do you want to hang out?
Exactly. That's how I'm the same way. And then next thing you know, it's like some of the best, most like closely cherished relationships I have are people that I met on trail that live, like 3,000 miles away right now. And I'm like, well, I guess I'll see you when I see you, buddy.
Right. Right.
It's this weird, I don't know. And my theory is that like when you're so stripped away from everything else, right? You're so tired and you're so hungry and you're literally living with your life inside of a backpack.
Right.
You just don't have any excuses. You don't have the energy to pretend to be anybody you're not.
Sure.
So at the end of the day, like if we get along, we get along. If we don't, that's okay. And I'm going to keep walking.
Right.
Like,
right.
dude, have a good one. And I think that's why like relationships just spawn so quickly on trail. Cause it's like, hey, I just hiked like 38 miles today. I'm eating cold ramen because my fuel ran out and I don't have a stove.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you want to have dinner with me? Like, I want to, like, do you want to, like, have a regular human conversation?
Right.
They're like, cool, bro, what's up? And it's like, okay, we're going to be friends. Like, it's really easy. That's all it.
I mean, that makes me think about, like, when we would go on our mission trips, our short-term mission trips. In high school, we went on a few together. We mentioned Costa Rica, but we went to Belize, and then you've done other stuff. But, you know, you go on those things, and people that you would never interact with here in the U.S., all of a sudden you're like stuck on a trip with them, and you're in a foreign country, and you don't know like what's going on. Obviously, everything's planned out for you. It's not quite the same as being on the AT, but like you start talking to people that you never would have at school or even at the church, and next thing you know, like you're friends. But it's also weird because once you go back, like you kind of know each other a little bit, but you slip back into who you were before.
Yeah.
And you don't interact with those people that you were such great friends with when you didn't have your phone or all those things. So
yeah, I think it just kind of goes back to like there has to be so much intentionality, like true intentionality, where you're going to sit there and be like, okay, like on Monday, I'm going to text blah blah blah, and I'm going to make sure that like their week's going okay.
Right.
Like I'm so about that. I mean, you know, like you and I, and Ben, and a couple of other guys growing up, like had a pretty close group of guys.
Yeah.
And I am so bad. Like I'm probably the worst out of anybody in our old group. To reach out to anybody. You know, like to text anybody, call them, see how they're doing. Like I don't, you know, I'm just not that way anymore. And I don't know. That's something that I've really been convicted about. Is like just reaching out to random old folks, being like, "Hey, man, like you still alive?
Are you still alive?"
Yeah, like literally, like you know, because it used to be. This is so funny to me, but like even back in the day, it used to be like, you know, are you on Xbox Live, bro? Like, you play Halo?
Right.
And now I don't even have an Xbox. Like, I don't have any. You know, I'm like, I'm at work or I'm asleep. Like that's what I do now. So
it's sad that that's what life is now, because like we were meant for so much more than, you know, sitting at an office or in an ambulance for 40 hours a week.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I don't know what are your shifts like? You work like 3 and then 3 12-hour shifts, or is it like a nursing schedule? Or
yeah, I do 3 13s, and then I pick up a deal overtime. So like I do Thursday, Friday, Saturday every week, back to back to back, and then I'll pick up throughout the weekly after that. So yeah, it's a long 13 hours in an ambulance. You know, we don't have it as cush as the fire department. We don't have houses to go back to, like fire stations to go back to and like watch TV or him. Like, and if you're stuck with a partner or if you're stuck with a person for the day that like you don't get along with, like sucks, bro. Like you're in that truck all day. So
yeah, but like we just weren't. I mean, I guess like your job is important, you know, like, and you're out there, you're helping people. You may not feel like that every time, all the time, but like my job, you know, I wasn't designed. We weren't designed to sit in an office from 9 to 5 every single day, and then to have Saturday and Sunday off where I have to get everything else done that I had to neglect because I needed to go make a paycheck.
Which includes intentional living, by the way. So then you're sitting there and you're like, okay, I'm going to live intentionally with my spouse and with myself and with my faith for the next 24 hours. That'll be good. That's good enough.
Yeah, and because of that, I mean, I've started waking up super early and in the morning to have an hour and a half to myself.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's been a really good discipline that I've been able to do probably for like 3 or 4 months now. I have been very on. And maybe even more just like the last 2, but like I've been very much like I get up at 5 a.m. every morning now. And the first thing I do is grab my headphones, turn on my daily Bible reading for the day. I don't read it, but I listen to it.
Sure.
Oftentimes more than once. And I'll do the dishes and I'll make coffee while I'm doing that. And then, then I journal. And it's been so good for me to actually be intentional for myself, because even though I wasn't designed to be in this role or do like work 9 to 5, like it's still like I still enjoy it sometimes, like I'm not saying my job is awful or anything like that. Like I like what I do. It just would be so nice to have that hour and a half to 2 hours all the time, to be intentional and do whatever I wanted to do.
Right. Well, and it's so funny because we're talking about, you made the point of, small term missions, and like sometimes you get back and you slip back into old habits or whatever. I think that's true about anything. But it's funny you say that, because there were times on trail where it's like everything you do is like that, and then in the contrast, or like the opposition to that, it's like all I wanted was like a mindless chore. Like, somebody please let me just do the dishes.
Right.
Because like all I do is hike and plan and have to analyze every decision I'm making. Like, can I sleep here? Is it dangerous? Do I have water? Is there access to water? Do I have enough food? How many miles a day do I have to average so that I don't run out of food?
Am I going to Giardia?
Right, in my case, yeah, bro. Or in my case, which this happened too frequently, and to admit with any pride, is like, okay, so I've run out of food. How many days or how fast do I have to walk until I can get to town so that I can get something, right? I'm sitting there analyzing every single micro decision that could possibly happen, right? And I think it's so cool that and like honestly so admirable that you have the discipline to do that in the mornings, because like sometimes something as simple as like a mindless task where you just get to listen to the word while you do the dishes and like forget that you're doing the dishes is like really cathartic.
Yeah. Oftentimes I forget that I'm listening to the word while I'm doing the dishes, and I'm trying to be more intentional about that. But you're right. Like, and there's times where I look at the dishes at night, the night before, and I'm like, you know what? I have time to do this right now. But I think to myself, like, no, I really enjoy the time in the morning that I do that. And so like, I've had a conversation where someone's like, oh no, I would much rather have the dishes done at night, and then I run the dishwasher and it runs overnight. And I was like, look, I actually, logically, that makes a lot of sense to do. But for me, like, that act of like just turning the sink on and doing something so mindless is so good for me. And I completely agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just talking to one of our mutual friends. He's a bit further ahead in like the life picture young adult thing than both of us are. He's got a kid. Married. I'm not married. You're married, and he has a kid. You don't have a kid. So it's like it's just a little ahead.
Right.
I remember about it. And he was like, we were having the exact same conversation basically, and he was like, "Yeah, man, it's just hard to find time for like stuff." And like, we were talking. Basically, I was asking him for like just generalized advice on like communication with loved ones, or in my case, for between me and my girlfriend. I was like, "Hey, like, is there anything that you can like advice you can give me on the XYZ, right? Like communication, making time for one another." Because she also works in EMS, and she's contemplating doing medical school right now, so she's like trying to balance all like studying for the MCAT and taking the MCAT and all that stuff. It's like a ton of work,
Yeah, ton of work.
And so it's just like it feels like there's no time, and he just started chuckling and he was like, "Yeah, get used to it." And that was just the beginning of it, right? Like he was a little, he was also like, well, luckily enough, it's like we've had to be really deliberate about that too. We've been married how many years? We have a kid, and it's so funny you say that, because he was just mentioning to me, he was like, we purposefully now, a couple nights out of the week, do not do any of our chores before bed. And yes, it sucks. And yes, the house probably smells and there's dishes piled up and the trash needs to be taken out. The next morning, get up. He's like, but we purposefully and intentionally will not touch anything that needs to be done, and we will sit and we will talk for an hour before bed, and we just do it together. And I was like, dude, huh, so simple. It's like who would have thought, just like making a different kind of sacrifice, instead of sacrificing alone time together to do the dishes and chores, And it's so simple and it sounds so funny. There's probably old married people that hear that and they're like, yeah, duh. I mean,
Duh.
obviously.
Yeah.
But it just seems like such a simple fix. And it's like,
Right.
oh yeah, it's a really good perspective to have. It's like it can get done later. Like don't ignore those people in your life,
Right. And I think Josie and I have actually done like we do that. I mean, we do that every night. Like I just because I do the dishes in the morning, but
Sure.
I want to be more intentional with that time that we have because we're just sitting on the couch watching mindless TV. And I think there's
Yeah.
a place for that because we do just get to shut our brains off. But we do it too much where we could spend 2 nights of the week not watching the TV and chatting with each other or things like that.
Right.
But it gets to a point also like we've been together 11 years. We've lived together for over 3 now. We've been married for over 3 years. Like sometimes you just don't have anything else to say,
Yep.
And honestly, like that's why sometimes she'll call me on her way home from work and be telling me about her day. And I was like, honestly, I'd rather not talk to you right now while you're in the car. And we'll talk
Yeah.
once you get home so we can actually interact with each other face to face and I can hear about your day.
Yeah, no, I get that. I think that's a cool, I think she probably understands that too. I think that's like a cool little opportunity that you get to be again like a leader in your marriage too, because it's like, hey, like I'm not ignoring you. I still care about you.
Yeah.
I'm gonna wait till we're in person because I would love to talk to you to your face. Like
right.
I want to talk to you. I don't want to talk at you.
Right. You know what's funny is that I just told you this, but I've never audibly said that to her. It's just something that I thought that I've have sometimes, but now I'm going to because like saying it out loud to you, I was like, wait, that's actually a really good idea and something that we should try to implement. So
yeah, I think that's important too because it shows, it lets. There's just more intentionality. There's more like personality. There's more like deliberate care there. And I don't even think it has to be that deep, to be honest. Like I think a lot of people are like, oh, blah, blah. No, it's like I just don't want to talk on the phone. Like let's just talk in person. Like
right. Yeah, you're literally on the way home. You're coming to where I am.
Yeah. like, I'm gonna grab like some ice cream and I'll meet you at the house. Like let's talk.
Yeah. For sure.
That's cool. That's super cool. Yeah, man, I don't know. Weird. It's the whole time thing is really hard. I think that's one of the biggest reasons why I just love to throw it because it's like it feels like you get a little bit of an escape from.
I was going to ask you that. Like, do you think that that's something that you do and you're starting to itch to do again because you're getting a little overwhelmed with like what's going on in life?
1,000% every time. It's basically my excuse. It's me running away. And I think there's healthy ways to do that. I don't think that we should always associate like running away with like problems or like avoiding things that need to be done, and that's part of it too, obviously. I'm not going to sit here and be like, no, I've never run away from my problems. Of course I have. But yeah, that's definitely, I mean, it's just, it feels so much more, I don't know, I have this weird, I've learned about myself over these 3 hikes and over other things that I've tried to do, whether it be like cramming extra work into my school commitments or whatever it is, right? It's like I tend to enjoy suffering, and I don't know why that. Truly, like I don't really, it's like if I'm weird, deep-rooted feeling where if I'm not suffering, I don't feel like I'm making progress, and I don't think that's necessarily healthy all the time.
I don't think that's healthy at all, to be honest with you. Like you shouldn't just like make yourself suffer.
Right.
Like, sometimes not sometimes suffering usually does produce like something good, like eventually. But like, yeah. And I think that people also have that same struggle with like they can't sit idle because they think that they're not being productive. And it's like, no, like you can sit still and you can be productive. Like it's okay.
Correct. And I think that's just, again, it's so dependent on what your confines for productivity are, right? Like,
right.
And so that's why, like on trail, it's so funny. On the CDT, the last one I did, that kind of capped off the Triple Crown for me. I really wanted to be pretty much what you just explained. Like I wanted to be really intentional. I wanted to be more understanding in why I'm making the decisions I'm making, as opposed to just like my end goal is to finish. And I think that was really good. There were avenues 100% where I pushed myself really, really, really hard because I wanted to see what I could do and how far I could take it. And then on the opposite side of that, I was like, okay, like I really like it here. Time is flying by. Once this is done, it's done. I can't get it back.
Yeah.
So I want to sit in this. Like, I want to stay here. Like, there was a couple times I found this amazing campsite. I think I was just outside of Glacier. So I was like northern Montana, just outside the park boundary. So there was really no major legal constraints to kind of wherever I wanted to go, as opposed to like national parks. It's like you can't breathe without getting a permit. They're like, hey, you have to have a permit for wearing shoes inside our park boundaries. It's like, okay.
Dude, I think it's crazy that they can.
It's so frustrating, and it's so frustrating. This is definitely like a entitled attitude to have, because we have such blessings in the fact that we have a national park system and a national forest system.
Right.
But after spending like damn near 8,000 miles on trail, where the vast majority of it is just like literally free for all, do whatever you want, sleep wherever you want, get water from wherever you want, being in a national park system feels so claustrophobic, because it's like, oh, am I allowed to be here? Can I, am I allowed to even drink some water here? Like, can I filter this? Like, can I get my cook stove out and make coffee or tea right here? Or am I going to get yelled at?
Right.
It is really funny. It's kind of frustrating. So all that to say, like, there's this campsite. It's like just outside the park boundary. So I feel like I have like a little bit of a, I've almost like pulled the wall over their eyes. I'm like, suckers, like I get to do what I want.
Loophole.
And I remember I was just sitting there and I set my tent up and I was like, I've got a little extra food. Like, I could be hungry for the next day or so. I'm just going to stay here. Like, screw it. I'm not walking tomorrow. I'm just going to stay here.
Yeah.
Because where is the end of trail? Where is it going to go?
Right.
Right. Like, yes, there's some constraints there. Like, yeah, seasons. I got to finish before like this date because the weather will be really bad or whatever. I'll run out of food eventually in the next like 3 days. Yeah, I got to keep walking.
Right.
But what is 1 day or 2 more days really gonna hurt me? And I think that was really awesome, dude. Like, I hadn't really ever done that before on a trail. It had been more like fairly planned, and like, the first on the AT I had to be back for school. I dropped out of college to go to this trail. I didn't tell my parents. I came home for Christmas and I was like, surprise, I'm living here again. It was like,
right.
It was my mom. My parents are separated. So it was like, my mom, I think, strategically understood that like it was really scary, but for her, but it was like going to be really good for me.
Yeah.
And I think my dad was more on the sense of like, you made a commitment to be in school. Like, what are you doing? Right.
Right.
And I think those both came out of love. But I made good with the parents, and my dad was like, okay, but here's the agreement. Like, you will go back to school. Like, you will go back to school and get an education. I was like, okay, fair. We shook on it, and I was like, fair. So the whole trail, I'm like hauling ass basically, because I'm like, I got to finish by August. Like, all of a sudden I have to put this whole trip into a, like a closed end, bookended calendar day to get back to school on time. So I had to be done by August. So, I hauled ass down this trail. I started March 1st and I finished July 14th, which on average, I think it takes most people around like 5.5 to 6 months. I did it in 4 months and 13 days. So I'm like flying down this trail, right? And it was the coolest experience, one of the best, if not the best experience of my life. And it was still rushed.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's a really good thing to think about later. It's like, okay, it's okay to just like sit and be there for a minute.
It's so funny how we keep waffling back and forth between how good it is to be part of community, but how good it is to be alone and to sit and to enjoy. And it's like that quote from The Office that, I wish that you knew you were in the good old days when they were happening.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, before you left them. Yeah. And I think balance, that's like the biggest piece. It's just balance is so important, right? Because it's like, we talk about this, I guess, can maybe not as the best example for folks out there, but like from a legalism standpoint in faith, it's like, you could get in a lot of trouble running down that road of like just following rules because you're supposed to follow the rules, right? Is having one drink, is that going to be, is that going to be horrible? No, it's balanced. Like, yeah, I'll have a beer or two, or, with you or Ben or whoever. But at the same time, like, there's balance there. Like, am I going to drink every day of the week? No, of course not. Am I going to drink? If I have a history of alcohol problems, like, am I going to drink? No, of course not. I'm going to choose not to do that, right? And I think that's just literally so. It's such a cop-out answer, but I literally think that's just what it is. It's balance. It's like, I want to be alone. I need to be alone. And after a while, I'm like, oh, this sucks. Like, I need to be with people. It's so frustrating because it's like, why can't I just?
It's hard to juggle.
Have both. Have you found that that's a difficult balance, a difficult battle being married?
So yeah, I used to think that, but then I started getting up earlier and I read a quote one time. It was like it was something along the lines of like, a good father and a good leader of his family, makes it a priority to get up before the rest of the family to have that time for himself. And
sure.
So I try to start implementing that, and that's when, like, recently I've been doing a good job of it. But there's also days where Josie's up at the same time as me because she has to go to work, and I used to look at those days as like, oh, you're impeding on my routine. But now they're more like, this is just another hour that we get from like 5 to 6 in the morning that we get to, spend together. And
yeah, I think that's really
right. And then I still have like from like 6 to 7, I'll do whatever I need to. And then I go to the gym, and the days that she's working, I go to the gym alone. And so like I have then that's just the other hour. It's like the 5 to 6 I'm spending with her, but now I have 7 to 8 or whatever at the gym alone. It's a little different. It's not the same thing as me being intentional and journaling and all that stuff, but like it's still time that I get to be by myself. And honestly, it's productive time for me. Like, I'm at the gym, I'm working to be better. So,
right. And I think that's normal.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, to like answering your question, yeah, before when we first got married, it was just nonstop. It was, and like, I honestly would like, I loved the weekends that she worked because I had 2 days where she worked Saturday and Sunday. I had that time to be by myself, or to go play golf, or do, whatever. And I didn't have to worry about checking in with her, doing things because she was at work. I don't look that way anymore because I've just found other avenues to get time for myself. But it's so important to have that time.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it really is. And that's super cool that you've kind of figured out a good avenue for that. And I'm sure it'll change here and there.
I don't even know what will happen when we have kids, like,
yeah.
So,
and that's so terrifying because I'd like to be married. I'd like to have kids. That's something I think about pretty frequently. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine. Like, how do you even do that? Yeah. I mean, I'm the youngest of 4, right? All my siblings have kids. Some have multiple kids. And when we're all together, it's the best time in the whole world. I love it. I used to not really care for babies, if I'm being honest. They're kind of weird. I'm like, baby, it's cool. Congrats. Like, what am I supposed to say?
Congrats.
And even, it's not even my kid. Right. Exactly. You've done what people have done for the history of man. Like, nobody cares. But then, and it's not even my kids, but then, you get with your nieces and nephews, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, you are the coolest, most fun, most pure little thing ever. Like, I would love to sit here and play Legos with you for 5 hours.
That's cool, because like we don't have a ton of that in our life, where when we have family gatherings, the kids that show up there are very loud, and like I'm not super close with them or anything like that. They're not my nieces and nephews. They're like extended cousins or step cousins and things like that. Like I like honestly have no really real connection to them.
Sure.
And so like I'm just like sitting there trying to eat my meal, and like this little girl is just like screaming, and I'm like
yeah, running up and down the halls like bloody
right,
murder.
and it's like, oh hey, like can you just chill for a second? But now
yeah, no, there's a lot of that. I think there's probably, you know, married people out there laughing, like people with kids out there laughing at us right now, like they don't even have kids,
right. Well, that's what I think, and I'm just hoping that when it's my own kid, like it's different, because like I love them, you know.
Yep. No, I yes, and all that to say, like we're sitting here talking about like having alone time. I'm pretty sure that just goes out the window. To be honest, I think it just goes away.
It's like I get 15 minutes in the bathroom to take
literally,
and I'm going to enjoy those. That I'm going to make it extended as long as I can.
Yes, exactly, dude. That's me at work now. I'll be at work, and I'm like, dude, I know there's people there that need help. Like, I'm here to help. I'm here to run 911 calls, but I have to poop. Leave me alone, please. Give me 10 minutes. Give me 10 minutes,
hilarious.
please. Because it's just calls all day long, dude. Just calls. And I love it. It's fun. And it's really cool to meet people in a totally unique atmosphere. You know, like we're sitting here, you know, unscripted conversations going back and forth between like faith and weird stories and family and whatever. I think it's a really cool avenue. Like, I would say the vast majority of people that work in my field are not Christians. Specifically because a lot of time you're surrounded by like
such dark things,
you know. Yeah, and like deaths and like you know, and I think a lot of that is a really easy excuse for people to just like go straight to like pretty much just an excuse of like pleasure seeking behavior. You know, just like whatever they want to do whenever they want it, because we see a lot of deaths. So it's like, well, I never know when my time's going to be. I may as well have fun, you know. And I think I probably fall into that category too. But my view of having fun is like packing a lunch and like going to the Cahutta Wilderness for like 6 hours and like seeing, like going fishing and catching a bunch of trout. I'm like, oh yeah, that was awesome. Like I had a good time, you know, instead of getting blackout 3 nights a week. But I think it's a really cool opportunity to like just be a witness to people, like to be completely frank about it, to be able to be a witness of the gospel to people. Because it's like you could be having a decent day, a regular day. It could be a Wednesday, and you show up to that person's house and they're having the most memorable worst day of their life, right? Like I'll never forget that day that on that Wednesday that they called 911. And not all those, they're not all like that. You know, we do run, people joke, we do run calls for like toe pain or like, you know, somebody's nose is bleeding at the soccer field. Like, yeah, we do a lot of that. But there's a lot of other stuff, you know, and it's like, I think it's a really unique opportunity to be like, hey, you know, instead of being like the calloused, you know, EMS provider, I can hopefully, fingers crossed, hopefully be a little bit of like a, you know, of a gospel,
of a light, and a light in the dark world.
That's I don't know. We'll see. I'm sure there's days I'm definitely not.
I'm sure there's days we all are not.
Yeah, but
it's good that you're cognizant of it, and I appreciate having people like you out there who are doing it. So that's
yeah. And it's funny, we're talking about it. As I do it more, I recognize other people that are doing it more, and I realize that it's not just me, or that it's not just 2 or 3 people. You know, there's more people that are doing, you know, trying to be similar, trying to be good stewards of what they believe, or like to help people out. You know, and so I think it's kind of cool. Lately, like this last week, actually, I've known this guy, a colleague of mine, for probably about a year now. And we actually just went rafting together. We went up to the Nantahala and went rafting with a group of people. So fun. Yeah. With a group of folks from work. Yeah. And I've known him for almost a year and only just found out that he is also a Christian. And it was like, what does that say about me? That like, you know, that I'm not more either outward or bold or blunt with my faith that like it wouldn't have come up yet in a year.
Right.
You know? So I think that was really cool. And it's like the more I take that leap and just like kind of swallow my pride a little bit and just do it, and like whether that mean like talking about it or like just living that way, the more I recognize that like other people are also doing that. And they're out there. It's not just me out there,
right.
you know?
Yeah. I mean, that's a good thing to realize and to have perspective on. It's just how can I make sure that I'm living a way that is different, but that's and different in a good way, and different in a way that's shining the light. That's what I try to think about. It's like, and it's been a prayer of mine. It's like, hey God, like I want to be someone that I walk in a room that the atmosphere just shifts because you're living inside me. Like I don't have to say anything. I don't have to do anything. I'm just a vessel for you, and because I walk in a room, that means you're there too, and people know that. So,
yeah, that's cool. That's super cool. And I there you'll see, the physical ramifications of that.
I hope so. Sure. I mean, it's been a prayer that I've actually, it's a recent thing, like to be that obvious. Because I used to run away from that. I used to not want to be that different. But I'm coming back around to it. I'm coming back to being bold and being different and being okay with being different. Because for a long time I was not okay with being different. Well, I just hated being treated differently. I knew I was different and I was okay with that, but I hated walking into a room and that the atmosphere shifting, and then people being like, "Oh, we got to stop doing what we're doing now," like so.
No, I get that. I think that's really valuable personal insight to know that about yourself, because I think a lot of people would just keep doing whatever they're doing for a while and just be like, well,
yeah,
whatever, I guess whatever. I don't really care at this point. I don't know. And I think that's it's funny you say that too, because there's a lot of that kind of moving back to trail. It's so funny. I feel like all I ever do is talk about trails. I'm like that old I'm like that old high school football guy that's like 50, and he's like, hey, just put me in the fourth quarter, man. I would have been in the NFL. It's like, no, you wouldn't, dude. Like, right. That's literally how I feel so often talking about trail. And it's so funny because I was actually thinking about this the other day. I was on the Appalachian Trail a couple days ago just for like a really short day hike. I had just driven out that way. And I was sitting there and it was like weird perspective. I was like, damn, it's been 9 years since I thru hiked. That's crazy. And it's a long time. And it took almost 7 years and almost $20,000 basically to do all 3 trails over time, or work or flights or getting, making it work. And I don't know, it's just, it's funny to sit and think like how long those things take, and realizing like you're talking about not feeling different, some people not wanting to feel different, but then at the same time wanting to be unique, right? It's like, well, you kind of got to pick. What are you going to be? You want to be like everybody else or don't you? And I think that's like really insightful, because it's like you get out on trail and you're not like anybody else. There's people from all over, and the trail, one of the things that's so fun about it and so cool about it is it does have like this old world hippie, like totally free lifestyle where like everybody has a goal. It's not like you're just wandering around aimlessly. There's a goal but you get total freedom in what you want to do, which is really cool. And it's almost like one of the last, this is not true, but it feels true. I think it's like one of the last like vestiges of that, I feel like, in our normal culture, if you want to call it normal. And so, you say like you walk into a room, it's like everybody, and sometimes people are like, oh, well, whisper. It's like, oh, we can't keep doing what we're doing because Christians here. Dude, I felt that on trail where people were like, oh, like you don't want any of these mushrooms. And I'm like, no, not, I mean, like kind of, to be honest, but like, no, like, no, it's fine. But like, you guys can do your thing. Like, be your own person. Like, I'll keep an eye out for you if something happens. Like, we're all cool here. Like, I want to make sure everybody's safe, but like, there's no judgment here, man. Like, do your thing, bro. Like, there's a lot of that, which is so fun to me on trail because it's like again, it feels like that big brother mentality where like everyone kind of has each other's back,
which is cool.
But it does feel weird. There have been times where I've been, I've had good conversations, good debates with people. Some of my closest friends on trail are non-believers, and we'll just sit. We'll hike like 30 miles a day, and we'll just put our headphones away and we'll sit and talk. And
yeah, that's cool.
Weird conversations will come out of that. It's like sometimes, more often than not, if I'm being honest, more often than not, my answer to them is, dude, look, I don't know, man. I don't have an answer for you. I don't know. So.
Absolutely. Well, we've had a very wide range of conversation, and it's been really good. Yeah, what's your takeaway?
It's a really good question. It's a hard question. I think for me, we're sitting here talking about, having like impromptu. This is your form is designed around impromptu conversation, right? Like, that's the whole concept of your outlet here, is to have non-scripted, genuine conversations with people, I think. And that is something that I would love to be better at and do more with people. And we are earlier in this episode, we were talking about like old friends and being out of touch with people. And honestly, I think that's part of it, just like checking in and having like a non-scripted, like, hey man, what's up?
Yeah.
Instead of being like, how are you doing? Like, is everything going okay? How's work?
Yeah.
Like, not like the generic question everyone else is also asking them, but just being like, hey man, like leaving it open-ended. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
What's up?
Right. That's good.
I think that's definitely something I'd want to do. So
that's good. All right. So for you, Shim, and anyone listening to this, call someone that you haven't talked to in a while this week and just say, hey, what's up?
I have the exact person in mind as soon as
you go. Give them a call.
I'm gonna do it.
I love that.
And then, on side note here, for anyone listening, if you have any interest in through hiking or questions, or if that's something where you're like, wow, that's freaking cool, I've always wanted to do something like that, call me. I'll see if Steven can put my info in the show notes or anything like that, and reach out to me, email, phone number, whatever works. If you just want advice, if you want to talk through, if you already have a plan set up and you want to talk through it, if you don't know anything, call me. Let's make it happen.
I love that. Thank you for your time, Shem. This has been a great conversation. It's been good.
Yeah, man, of course. Seriously, anytime.
All right, we'll do it again soon. Thanks so much for listening to this episode. Your support means the world to me. If you enjoyed this podcast, make sure to follow on whatever platform you're listening on and send it to a friend. If you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please leave a review. They really help boost my exposure. If you're on YouTube, make sure that you're subscribed and liking every video. It really helps the algorithm. Links to all my and my guest socials, along with music credits, are in the show notes. Thanks so much. Love y'all. Bye.